He came back. 7 years of silence, 7 years of survival, 7 years of building myself from nothing while he built an empire. And he came back. Not with an explanation, not with an apology. He came back on his knees. And the worst part? He didn't come to the woman he remembered. He came to the woman she never expected me to become. The sister he chose over me had sent him. And what he found at my door shattered everything he thought he knew. But let's start from the beginning. Before this story goes any further, and trust me, it goes far. If emotional stories that hit like a blade and heal like a scar are your thing, subscribe right now. Because what you are about to hear is not just a love story. It is a reckoning. The city of Varenhold was the kind of place that looked beautiful from a distance and swallowed you whole once you were inside. Glass towers, old money, new danger. It was a city that had two faces, the one it showed in daylight, polished and indifferent, and the one it wore after midnight, when the men who actually owned it moved through its streets like shadows with signatures. At the top of that world sat one name, Kalen Dry Morrow, 34 years old, head of the Morrow Syndicate, a network so deeply woven into Varenhold's commerce, law, and silence that even the people who feared him weren't entirely sure he was real. He didn't appear in newspapers. He didn't attend galas. He didn't need to. Power like his didn't require a stage. It simply existed, the way gravity existed. Invisible, absolute, and inescapable. Those who worked for him moved carefully. Those who crossed him disappeared quietly. And those who somehow caught his attention, truly caught it, found that their lives divided into two distinct halves, before and after. He had never married, never been photographed with a woman twice, never given anyone a reason to believe there was anything beneath the coldness, not warmth, not want, not weakness. The city had accepted this as fact. The city was wrong. Because 7 years ago, before the empire, before the silence, before the war that nobody talks about, there was a girl, ordinary, invisible, wholly unaware of what she carried inside her. Her name was Saoirse Weil, and she is the reason everything you're about to hear happened. The morning Saoirse's story truly began again, she was doing what she had taught herself to do every day for 7 years, moving forward without looking back. She ran a small catering kitchen on the Lower East Side of Varenhold. Nothing glamorous, bare concrete walls, second-hand equipment, a staff of 4 people who had nowhere else to be, and a boss who asked nothing of them except honesty and hard work. The sign above the door read, "Vial and Table" in plain black letters. No logo, no story behind it, just a name and a purpose. Saoirse was 31 now. She wore her hair pulled back, always. She kept her face composed, always. She had learned, the hard way, the only way that truly teaches, that softness was a luxury she could not afford. Not in this city, not in this life, not after everything. But softness had not left her entirely. It lived in the way she cooked, in how she tasted a dish the same way her mother once had, eyes closed, head slightly tilted, like she was listening for something the tongue couldn't quite name. In the way she remembered, without meaning to, that cooking had once been the only language she and her mother shared before the world took her mother too. She had a daughter, 6 years old, quiet, sharp-eyed, and so unnervingly perceptive that Saoirse sometimes caught herself wondering if the child could see the things she tried to hide. Her name was Maren. And Maren was the reason Saoirse got up every morning, the reason she had not broken, the reason she had rebuilt herself from a single room, a borrowed stove, and a grief so large it had no edges. What Saoirse did not know was that in less than 48 hours, the life she had so carefully constructed would begin to crack. Not from the outside, from the past. It started with a contract she almost didn't bid on, A private catering request. No company name. No event description. Just an address in the north quarter of Varenhold. The part of the city where the buildings had no signage and the security at the door didn't smile. And a number that made Saoirse sit down when she saw it. 3 times her monthly revenue. For a single evening. Her instinct said no. Her instinct had kept her alive for 7 years, and it was saying no clearly, the way it always did when a contract felt like a door she wasn't meant to open. But Marin's school fees were due. The refrigeration unit in the back kitchen had started making a sound that repairmen quoted in numbers that made her stomach drop. And the truth, the quiet, unglamorous truth, was that Vale and Table was surviving, but only just. So she said yes. She arrived with her 2 best staff, Joran and Petra, both of whom went quiet the moment the car turned onto the North Quarter Street. The building was unremarkable on purpose. Everything about it said, "Nothing important happens here," which meant everything important happened here. They were led to a private dining room on the 4th floor. 12 guests, long table, the kind of silence that cost money to maintain. Saoirse set up her station, kept her head down, and cooked. She didn't know who the guests were. She didn't ask. That was a rule she had made for herself years ago. Cook the food, leave the room. Do not get curious about the people who can afford rooms like this. But halfway through the second course, a door at the far end of the room opened, and a man walked in. She didn't see his face immediately. She was plating. Her hands were moving. Her eyes were on the dish. But the room changed when he entered. The temperature didn't drop. It just stilled. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Chairs shifted almost imperceptibly. Even the air seemed to reorganize itself around him. Saoirse looked up. And for exactly 3 seconds, the past and the present collided so violently inside her chest that she forgot how to breathe. She knew that walk. She knew those shoulders. She knew him. And he hadn't seen her yet. He sat at the head of the table. He never looked her way. Not once during the meal. Not during the 3rd course. Not during the 4th. Saoirse moved through the room like a ghost. As she always had. As she had trained herself over years of making herself small enough to disappear. Her hands didn't shake. She would not let them shake. Not here. Not in front of him. But her mind was a riot. 7 years. He looks exactly the same. No. Worse. He looks like he became everything he said he would and forgot everything it cost. The meal ended. The guests began to disperse. Saoirse was packing down her station when she heard it. Footsteps. Deliberate. Unhurried. The kind that belonged to someone who had never once needed to rush for anything. She didn't turn around. Who catered this evening? The voice was directed at someone else. His aide, she assumed. But the question landed on her skin like a brand. A pause. Then the aide's voice. "A private kitchen, sir. Vale and table. Small operation. Lower East Side." Silence. "The lamb course." Not a question. A statement. "Yes, sir." "Find out who prepared it specifically." Saoirse's jaw tightened. She still didn't turn around. She focused on wrapping the serving tray with the kind of concentrated precision that had nothing to do with the tray. "That would be me." She heard herself say it before she decided to. Steady. Quiet. Against every instinct she had. The footsteps stopped. She turned, and Caelan Drymorrow looked at her for the first time in 7 years. Something moved across his face. Fast, controlled, gone in less than a second. But she saw it. She had always been able to read him. That, at least, hadn't changed. Saoirse Vile. Her name in his mouth sounded like a door being opened in a room that had been locked for a very long time. She held his gaze. Mr. Morrow. The room was not empty. His aide stood 3 feet away. 2 guards flanked the entrance. Everyone was watching. And yet somehow, in that moment, It felt like the most private conversation on earth. I want your kitchen contracted, exclusively, starting next week. Her heart didn't leap. It dropped. This was not an opportunity. This was the beginning of a story she would not be able to undo. Calendray Morrow did not make impulsive decisions. Every move he made, every contract, every alliance, and every word spoken in rooms that cost fortunes to keep quiet, was calculated at least 3 steps ahead. Emotion was not a variable he factored in. Sentiment was not a thing he permitted himself. He had built the Morrow Syndicate on the ruins of both, and he had no intention of letting either back through the door. He told himself this in his car on the way back from the North Quarter. He told himself this again when he poured a drink he didn't finish. He told himself this a third time standing at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse, looking out at a city that was entirely his, and feeling, inexplicably, infuriatingly, none of the satisfaction that usually came with that view. Sauer-Savale. He hadn't spoken that name in 7 years, hadn't allowed himself to. He had locked it somewhere deep and efficient and final, the way he dealt with everything that threatened to make him human. And it had worked. He had been certain it had worked. Until she turned around in that dining room and looked at him like he was something she had already survived. Not with hatred. That would have been easier. Not with longing. That would have been manageable. She had looked at him with the settled calm of someone who had already grieved a thing and come out the other side of it. Like he was a chapter she had closed, annotated, and put on a shelf she no longer visited. That look. That was what sat in his chest now like something without a name. He picked up his phone, set it down, picked it up again. Run a full background on veil and table, he said when his aide answered. Everything, not just the business. A pause. How far back, sir? Kalen's jaw tightened. 7 years. He told himself it was strategy. He was already lying to himself. The contract arrived the next morning. Not by email, not through an agency. By hand. A sealed envelope delivered by a man in a dark coat who waited at the door of veil and table with the measured stillness of someone trained never to be noticed. Saoirse read it twice, then a third time. It was not a catering contract. It was a residency. Her kitchen, her staff, her menus. But operating out of the Morrow Building's private culinary floor 3 days a week. Exclusive access. Full equipment upgrade included. A retainer that would clear every debt she carried and leave enough remaining to actually breathe. She folded it. Put it in the drawer beneath the register. By noon, she had taken it out 4 times. By evening, she called her staff together. Joran pumped his fist. Petra looked at her with the quiet knowing of someone who had watched her boss carry a weight for too long without naming it. You sure? Petra asked. No, Saoirse said. But we're doing it anyway. The first day at the Morrow Building was a study in controlled discomfort. The culinary floor was extraordinary. Equipment that cost more than her entire kitchen, a pantry stocked with ingredients she had only ever ordered for special occasions, a silence so complete it felt engineered. She worked through it, head down, focused. She had a menu to execute and a standard to meet, and she was not going to let the weight of this building, or the man at the top of it, make her hands unsteady. He appeared at 1:30, not announced, not expected. He simply walked in as powerful men always did. Saoirse didn't stop moving. The kitchen is active, she said, without turning. If you're here to observe, there's a window panel on the left. A pause. It's my kitchen. Right now it's mine. She adjusted the heat on the front burner. You contracted the space. That means I run it. Another pause. Longer this time. And then, unexpectedly, he stayed. Not at the window. He pulled a stool to the far end of the preparation counter, far enough to be out of her way, close enough that she was aware of him with every movement she made. He didn't speak. He watched. It unnerved her. She refused to show it. 30 minutes passed. She plated the first dish, a slow braised short rib with a reduction she had developed over 2 years of small adjustments, the kind of recipe that existed nowhere except inside her own muscle memory. She slid it to the end of the counter without a word. He looked at it, then at her. "You're not going to tell me what it is? You're not going to ask?" Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile. Something adjacent to one, in the way that winter light was adjacent to warmth. Present, but not yet enough. He tasted it. She watched him the way she always watched. Not the face, but the stillness afterward. The moment after the first bite when the body decided before the mind did. He set the fork down slowly. "Your mother's recipe?" he asked quietly. The question hit her somewhere she hadn't protected. Because he remembered. After everything, after all of it, he remembered that. Her throat tightened. "Modified," she said. "She's gone." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of 7 years and everything that lived inside them. He didn't fill it with words. For once in his life, Kaylin Dry Morrow seemed to understand that silence was the only appropriate response. And that restraint, that small, unexpected decency was more dangerous to her than anything else he could have done, because it reminded her of who he used to be, before he chose wrong. The whispers started on the third day. Saoirse heard them as she always heard things in unfamiliar buildings. Not directly, but in the pauses between conversations when people didn't realize they were still audible. "She's from the Lower East Side. What is she even doing up here?" He upgraded an entire floor for a caterer. "Since when does Morrow care about food? Have you seen the way he looks at her?" "It's not about the food." She kept her face neutral and her hands busy and said nothing. But on the fourth day, something changed. She was leaving the culinary floor when a woman appeared at the end of the corridor. Not staff, not security. The kind of woman who walked through spaces like this as though they had been built for her specifically, which, Saoirse quickly understood, this one had reason to believe. Tall, immaculate. The kind of beauty that had been maintained and weaponized simultaneously for a very long time. Her name, Saoirse would later learn, was Undine Voss, the daughter of Renard Voss, Kaylin's most powerful business ally, and the man whose political connections kept the Morrow Syndicate untouchable in 3 different jurisdictions. Undine had spent 4 years positioning herself as the inevitable next chapter of Kaylin's life. Everyone in his circle knew it. Everyone assumed it was only a matter of time. "You're the caterer." Not a question, not remotely warm. "I am," Saoirse said. Undine looked at her the way people looked at things they were deciding whether to step over or remove entirely. "He gets bored easily," she said. "Whatever you think is happening, it isn't." Saoirse held her gaze. "I'm here to cook." "Good." Undine's smile arrived precisely calibrated, enough warmth to maintain plausible deniability, not enough to mean anything. "Stay in the kitchen." She walked away without waiting for a response. Saoirse stood in the corridor for a moment, alone, and felt the old, familiar weight of it, the warning dressed as advice. The threat wearing the costume of concern. She had heard that voice before. It had come from Zara's mouth. Her sister. 7 years ago, the night she lost everything. 6 days into the residency, Kaylin hosted a private dinner. 20 guests. The kind whose last names appeared on buildings and legislation. Saoirse and her team were to serve a 7-course meal, the most ambitious menu she had ever executed outside of her own imagination. She was ready. She had been ready for days. What she was not ready for was Undine Voss arriving an hour before service and quietly, efficiently, rearranging the seating plan so that Sairsa's serving route placed her in front of the table's most prominent guests for every course, visible, exposed, subject to every comment powerful bored people made about the staff when they wanted to remind themselves of their position. Sairsa noticed. She said nothing. She served. Third course. A man at the far end of the table, older, silver-haired, with the particular confidence of someone who had never once been told no, picked up his plate and held it out to her without looking up from his conversation. "This is cold. Take it back." She checked the plate. It wasn't cold. The temperature was exactly correct. She had plated it 40 seconds ago. "I apologize, sir. I can check." "I didn't ask you to check. I asked you to take it back." He finally looked at her. A slow, deliberate look designed to reduce. "Do you understand? Or do I need to find someone more qualified?" The table had gone quiet. 20 pairs of eyes, every single one of them watching to see what she would do. Sairsa kept her face composed. She reached for the plate. "Leave it." The voice came from the head of the table. Kalen hadn't stood. He was still seated, one hand resting on the table, his expression exactly the same as it always was. Unreadable. Absolute. But his eyes were on the silver-haired man with the particular quality of attention that made rooms go cold. "The dish is correctly prepared and correctly served," he said. Quiet. Final. "If you have a criticism of the menu, bring it to me. She is here at my invitation." The silence that followed had weight and texture. The silver-haired man set the plate down, said nothing. Sairsa didn't move for a moment. She was aware of Ondine at the far side of the room, perfectly still, watching with an expression that had stopped pretending to be anything other than what it was. She was aware of Kalen not looking at her, deliberately, carefully not looking at her, in the way that somehow felt more like protection than if he had. She finished the service. She did not thank him afterward. She didn't trust her voice enough. But later, alone in the elevator, she pressed her back against the wall and let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 6 days. No one had chosen her side in so long she had forgotten what it felt like. She was furious that it was him. It happened on a Tuesday. Sairsa was leaving the Morrow building alone. Yorin and Petra had gone ahead, and she had stayed late to prep the following day's mise en place. The car park beneath the building was quiet at that hour. Expensive cars, long shadows, the heavy silence of a space that assumed everyone inside it was safe. She was halfway to her car when she heard the footsteps. 2 sets. Measured. Closing. She didn't panic. She had lived in this city long enough to know the difference between coincidence and intention, and this was intention. She kept walking. Steady pace. Hand already moving toward her phone. "Ms. Vile." She stopped. The man who stepped into the light was not familiar. Mid-40s, broad, the kind of face that had learned to express nothing. The second man stayed back, near the exit. "You should consider ending your contract with Morrow," the first man said. Conversational, almost polite. Quietly, "Before the end of the week." Sairsa looked at him. "Who sent you?" "That's not a question you want answered." "I'll decide what questions I want answered." Something moved in his expression. Not quite respect. Recalibration. He stepped closer, and the intent shifted from verbal to something with edges. Then a door opened behind her. And the energy in the car park shifted so suddenly and so absolutely that even the man in front of her stilled. Kalen walked out alone. No aid, no security, which somehow made him more dangerous, not less. He looked at the man in the light the way cartographers looked at territory they were about to rename. "You have 10 seconds to tell me who you work for before this becomes a conversation you won't enjoy." The man said nothing. 5 seconds. The 2 men left. No dramatic exit. Just a rapid, quiet disappearance that told Saoirse everything she needed to know about how thoroughly they understood the situation. Kaelin turned to her. Are you hurt? No. She hated that her voice came out steady. She wanted to be angry. She was angry. Did you know this would happen? No. A pause. But I should have anticipated it. Who sent them? He looked at her for a long moment. Something moved behind his eyes. The particular expression of a man deciding how much truth was safe to give. Someone who believes removing you removes a problem. And what problem is that? He didn't answer. Kaelin. His name in her mouth. First name, no title. It came out before she could stop it. 7 years of careful distance collapsed in a single syllable. He heard it. She saw him hear it. I'll have a security detail assigned. I don't want a security detail. I want an answer. He stepped closer. Close enough that she could see the thing he was trying not to show. The problem, he said quietly, is that you're here. And I haven't been able to make myself remove that problem. The air between them held still. That was not nothing. And they both knew it. But knowing it and being safe because of it were two entirely different things, and the danger had only just introduced itself. The following morning, Saoirse arrived at the Morrow building to find her access card declined. She tried it twice. The panel read the same both times. Access revoked. She stood at the entrance for a moment, her equipment cases at her feet. Joran and Petra exchanging a look behind her that they were trying to make invisible. Go get coffee, she told them. I'll sort this. She called the facilities line, was transferred again. Finally reached the contracts administrator. A measured, neutral-voiced man who told her, with the careful sympathy of someone delivering a message they didn't write, that her residency had been suspended pending a review of the arrangement. A review, she repeated. Yes, Ms. Vielle. I don't have further details at this time. She hung up. She stood on the pavement outside the most powerful building in Varenhold's North Quarter, in the cold, with 2 staff members and 3 cases of equipment, and she felt it. The specific bone-deep humiliation of being removed, quietly, efficiently, without a face attached to the decision. She knew this feeling. She had felt it once before, in a different context, with different stakes, and it had taken her 3 years to stop feeling it in her sleep. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Don't go home, said the voice on the other end. Female, clipped. Vaguely familiar in a way she couldn't immediately place. They pulled your access because they want you rattled. If you go home now, they win the first move. Who is this? A pause. Someone who's been watching Ondine Voss operate for 4 years and is tired of it. Another pause. There's a side entrance on Vale Street. Ironic, I know. Service level. Code is 7741. Use it. The line went dead. Saoirse stared at her phone. Everything about this was a reason to walk away. Everything about this was a door with unknown things behind it. And yet she thought of Marin, of the school fees, of the refrigeration unit, of every single morning she had gotten up and decided that survival required motion. She picked up her equipment case. Change of plans, she told Joran and Petra. Side entrance. What she didn't know, couldn't have known standing on that pavement, was that the person who pulled her access and the person who gave her the code were not enemies with each other. They were playing her from both sides, and the game had a third player she hadn't met yet. She found him waiting at the service-level entrance. Not his aide, not security. Him, Kaelin, in a coat that cost more than her monthly rent, standing in a corridor that smelled of industrial cleaning fluid and recycled air, looking profoundly out of place and entirely unbothered by it. Saoirse stopped walking. You pulled my access, she said. I reinstated it. He nodded toward the corridor. Walk with me. I'm not walking anywhere until you explain. Saoirse. The way he said her name had changed from last night. Less careful, more like it used to sound. Please. That word. From him. She had never once heard it in all the time she'd known him. She walked. He fell into step beside her. They moved through the service corridor in silence for a moment, and she was acutely aware of how strange it was. This man, this city, this version of herself, all converging in a basement hallway because 7 years ago, everything had broken in a way she still carried in her body. Someone above me in the alliance structure ordered the suspension, he said finally, without my knowledge. Ondine's father. He didn't confirm it, which was its own confirmation. You reinstated it, she said. That puts you in direct conflict with Renard Voss. Yes. Over a catering contract. He stopped walking. She stopped because he did, and turned to face him, and found him looking at her with an expression she recognized from a long time ago, the one he wore when he was done performing composure and had temporarily run out of architecture to hide behind. It's not about the contract, he said. You know it's not about the contract. Her jaw tightened. Don't. I need to say, you don't get to need anything from me. Her voice stayed level. That was the one thing she had. The voice. She had practiced it for 7 years. You lost that. You made a choice, and you lost that. The corridor was empty. Just them. Just this. I know, he said quietly. I know I did. Then why am I here, Kaylin? Why did you contract me? Why did you reinstate access? Why are you standing in a service corridor instead of sending your aid? He was quiet for a long moment. Because I've spent 7 years trying to be someone who doesn't make that mistake again, he said. And I don't know if that's possible, but I know I can't find out from a distance. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of everything neither of them was ready to say yet. Her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. A message from an unknown number. 4 words. Ask him about Riven. Her blood went cold. She didn't know what Riven was, but something in her body did. She asked him about Riven. She watched his face when she said it, carefully, as she watched everything. And what she saw was not the controlled blankness he deployed for everything else. It was older than composure, a reaction that had happened to him rather than been chosen. Where did you hear that name? His voice had dropped to a register she hadn't heard before. Someone sent it to me, just now. He took her phone, read the message, handed it back. His jaw was tight. We need to move. Tell me what Riven is. His jaw tightened. It's a code name. Your father's hidden partition. The one Rendell has been hunting for 20 years. He held her gaze for 1 second. He named it after you. Your birth name, before your mother changed it. Riven Vale. A pause. We need to move. Now. Kaylin. Now. He was already moving, hand at the small of her back. Not possessive, urgent, guiding her toward the elevator with the brisk efficiency of someone who had just recalculated every variable in a room. They were on the 3rd floor when the building's security system announced itself. Not an alarm exactly, more like a frequency, low and continuous, the lights shifting to a secondary setting. His aide was already in the corridor. North entrance, 2 vehicles, they're not ours. Kaylin's expression didn't change. How many? 4 visible, more assumed. Get her to the interior suite, lock it down. I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what's happening. He turned to her. The urgency in his face was not about strategy. Someone has been watching you since before you took this contract. I've been trying to find out who and why before they moved. A pause. They've moved. Because of me? Because of what you don't know about yourself yet. He held her gaze. What I haven't told you. I should have. Before this. A crash from the floor below. The building trembled once, softly, like a warning. "There's a man," Kaylin said, "who has been hunting this inheritance for 7 years. He believes you either have it, or you are it." A seam was giving way beneath his voice. "His name is Dax Rendell. He was your father's—" The lights cut out entirely. 3 seconds of complete darkness. When the emergency system activated, Kaylin was already in front of her. Not beside her. In front of her. Facing the corridor. Between her and whatever was coming. And from somewhere below them, a voice carried through the building's silence. Unhurried. Almost amused. "I've been waiting a long time for this, Morrow. Step aside and we can keep this civilized." They made it to the interior suite. Reinforced walls, single entrance, the kind of room that existed in buildings like this for exactly these moments. Kaylin's aide secured the door. 2 of his security team flanked the entrance outside. Saoirse sat down because her legs required it. "Talk," she said. Kaylin stood near the door, still facing it, as though his proximity to the exit was the only thing maintaining order. Then slowly, he turned. "Your father," he began. "I don't have a father. He left before I was born. That's what my mother told me." "Your mother protected you." A pause. "From the truth. And from the people who would come looking for you if they knew the truth." Saoirse felt the room tilt slightly. Not physically. Something deeper. More interior. "What people?" "Your father's name was Ivo Vielle." He watched her face as he said it. "That name means nothing to you." "No. It meant everything to the people who ran the Western trade infrastructure of this city for 30 years. Ivo Vielle wasn't a man who left. He was a man who was taken apart. His network dismantled, his assets seized, his identity legally erased by a consortium that wanted what he had built and didn't want to pay for it." She was very still. "When?" "You were 2 years old." The silence had a different quality now. Vast, without a clear edge. "My mother never—" "She chose silence to keep you alive." His voice softened by a fraction. "It worked. Until now." "Why now?" "Because you came back to this city. Because you built a visible business. Because Dax Rendell has been monitoring anyone connected to the Vielle name for years, and when your business registration appeared in Varenhold's commercial registry 18 months ago..." He stopped. "He found me." "He found you." She stood up. Her body needed to be vertical for this. "What does he want?" "There is a partition of your father's network that was never seized. A significant one. Hidden. Legally untouchable because of how your father structured it." Kaylin held her gaze. "It can only be claimed by a direct blood descendant." The air left her lungs slowly. "You're telling me I'm the heir to something I didn't know existed. I'm telling you people have killed for far less than what you apparently stand to inherit." A pause. "And I'm telling you I've known about this for 3 weeks." The last sentence landed like a stone in still water. 3 weeks," she repeated. "Yes. You've known for 3 weeks." Her voice was very quiet. "And you contracted me anyway." He didn't look away. "Yes. To protect me? Or to use me?" He didn't answer. And that silence was the most frightening thing she'd heard all night. She left the interior suite the moment the building was declared clear. Not running. Walking. The straight-backed walk she had perfected over years of leaving rooms where things had been said that required distance to process. Kaylin didn't stop her. His aide moved to. One look was enough. She went home. She paid the babysitter. She stood in Marin's doorway for a long time watching her daughter sleep with the deep stillness of a child who trusted the world without question, the way only children who had been well-loved could. And Saoirse thought, how much of my life has been shaped by a history I wasn't allowed to know? She didn't sleep. By morning, she had made 3 decisions and several calls. To an archivist who owed her a favor, a notary in the old commercial district who had known her mother, and a woman named Brielle, who had worked for her father before Saoirse was old enough to remember him. Brielle answered on the second ring, which told Saoirse she had been waiting for this call. "You know who I am," Saoirse said. "I've known who you were since the day your mother brought you to Varenhold," Brielle said. "I was wondering when you'd find out." A beat. Then. "The call this morning. The woman who gave me the door code." Brielle's voice was steady. "I've been watching over you longer than you know. When they pulled your access, I couldn't let you walk away. Not when you were finally this close to the truth." The conversation lasted 2 hours. When it was over, Saoirse sat at her kitchen table with a cup of cold tea and a reality that had been rearranged entirely. Her father had not simply been wealthy. He had been, in the coded language of Varenhold's underworld, a founding seat, one of 4 original architects of the city's private trade infrastructure, a system so embedded in the city's economy that removing it would have collapsed 3 legitimate industries simultaneously. The consortium that destroyed him had spent 20 years trying to legally claim his partition of that infrastructure and had failed every time because the law, in this case, was not on their side. The partition was in her name, had been since her 2nd birthday. Her mother had known, had kept silent, had moved them to the Lower East Side and kept them small and invisible because visible meant targeted. And it had worked. Until Saoirse, not knowing, had built Violin Table and put her own name on a commercial registration in the city her father had helped build. She understood now why Kaelin had contracted her. She understood now why Ondine's father had moved to suspend her access. She understood why Dax Rendell had arrived with vehicles and intent. What she did not yet understand was the piece that Brielle had mentioned at the very end of the conversation, almost as an afterthought. Except Brielle was not a woman who dealt in afterthoughts. The consortium had a facilitator, someone inside your father's circle who gave them the access they needed to dismantle him, someone your father trusted without reservation. "Who?" Saoirse had asked. A pause. "The name in my records is a family name, Voss." She sat with that for a long time. Renard Voss, Ondine's father, Kaelin's ally. The man who had facilitated her father's destruction was the same man whose daughter had spent 4 years inside the Morrow Syndicate. The same man whose connections kept Kaelin's empire protected, which meant one of 2 things. Either Kaelin didn't know, or Kaelin did. Her phone lit up. A message from him. "We need to talk. Not about strategy, about what I owe you." She stared at it for a long time. The truth had arrived, and it had brought a choice with it that she wasn't ready to make. He came to her. Not to the Morrow building, not to Violin Table, to her apartment, the one no one in his world was supposed to know about. She opened the door before he knocked because she had heard the elevator and she already knew. He looked different outside the architecture of his power. Still precise, still contained. But a layer had been stripped away, the layer that his office and his building and his city provided, the layer that said, "I am exactly what I appear to be, and nothing beyond it." Without it, he looked like someone carrying the specific weight of a thing they hadn't put down in a very long time. "You know about Voss?" she said. Not a question. He stepped inside. She didn't offer him a seat. He didn't look for one. "I found out 14 months ago," he said. "What he did to your father. And you said nothing. I was building a case. If I moved against Voss without enough to finish him, he would have buried everything and taken half my network with him." A pause. "I needed time. You needed me exposed and accessible so Rendell would move and give you the evidence you needed to act." Her voice was very steady. "I was the bait." "No." The word came out harder than everything else. "You were never supposed to be in proximity to any of this. I contracted you to keep you close enough to protect, while I finished building the case. That was the intent." "And when did protection become something else?" He was quiet. When did it become? She stopped, restarted. 7 years ago, you chose my sister. You stood in front of me while I was carrying your child, and you chose Zara. You told me it was complicated, that there were pressures I didn't understand, that it wasn't about love. Her voice didn't break. She had cried that river dry years ago. And now you are standing in my apartment telling me you've been trying to protect me for months, and I don't know whether to believe you because the last time I believed you, it took me 3 years to get out of bed in the mornings. The room was absolutely still. I know, he said. That was all. Just that. I know. Where is Zara now? A pause. She left Varenhold 2 years ago. The arrangement between us. It was never real. It was a contract. Her family needed my alliance. My advisors at the time believed the partnership was strategic. His jaw tightened. I was 27 years old and I made a decision I have carried every day since. She looked at him for a long time. Maren is yours, she said quietly. You should know that. The silence that followed was the loudest thing she had ever heard. He didn't speak for a very long time. Sayersa watched it move through him, the information, the weight of it, the years it represented. And she did not soften the blow or walk it back or reach for him. She had not told him for his comfort. She had told him because Maren deserved a world where the truth existed, even if that truth was complicated and late and surrounded by wreckage. 6 years old, he said finally. Yes. She was... He stopped. His throat moved. When you were pregnant, when I... Yes. He turned away from her. She watched his shoulders, saw what happened to them. Kalen Dry Morrow, who had built an empire on composure, who had trained himself to feel nothing visibly, came apart in her kitchen in a way that was silent and total and without performance. She didn't go to him. Not yet. He turned back. His eyes were controlled again, but the thing behind them wasn't. I want to be part of her life. That's not your decision alone. I know. He took a breath. I know. I'll earn it. However long it takes. I'll earn it. He looked at her directly. Both of them, if you'll allow it. She opened her mouth to respond, and then her phone rang, Brielle's number. She answered it, listened for 40 seconds. Her face changed. When? She asked. An hour ago, Brielle said. Rendell didn't come for the partition documentation. He came for Maren. Someone told him about the child. He knows a direct blood descendant under the age of majority can be used as leverage to force a legal claim transfer. Sayersa was already moving. Where is she? Kalen asked. He had heard enough. School. Sayersa was pulling her coat on, hands steady in the manner they always steadied when genuine emergency replaced anxiety. She's at school, She checked the time. It's still in session, she's there. Kalen was already on his phone. Send 2 vehicles to Aldermere Primary on the east side, now. No sirens, no spectacle, just presence. He looked at Sayersa. We go together. Together, she agreed. In the car, she sat straight-backed and quiet while Kalen coordinated with his security team with the focused efficiency of a man who had run crises before and knew exactly how to move through them. She watched him work, saw the thing she had spent 7 years training herself not to look for, the version of him that was capable of this. Not just the power, the focus, the complete, undivided application of every resource he had toward a single goal. Her daughter. His daughter. They arrived at Aldermere Primary 4 minutes ahead of any threat. Maren was in the reading corner of her classroom, cross-legged, holding a book above her head in the precise posture of a child who is pretending to read while actually listening to everything happening around her. She looked up when Sayersa appeared in the doorway. Mama. Then her eyes moved, curious, not frightened, to the man behind her. Who's that? Someone important, Sayersa said. Come on, baby, we're leaving early today. Marin unfolded herself and came. At the door, she looked up at Kaylin with the directness that had always made Saoirse feel like her daughter could see further than most adults. "You have sad eyes," Marin told him. Something in Kaylin's face moved in a way that had nothing controlled about it. "I know," he said. "I'm working on it." Marin considered this seriously. Then she took her mother's hand and walked with them to the car. In the safe house Kaylin directed his driver to, away from the Morrow building, somewhere Rendel's network wouldn't immediately map, Saoirse sat with Marin until she fell asleep on the unfamiliar couch, one hand tucked under her chin, breathing the slow, deep breath of a child who trusted her mother without condition. Saoirse came out of the room and closed the door. Kaylin was waiting. "Tell me everything about Rendel," she said. "All of it. Not the version you edited for my protection." She met his eyes. "The real version. Because tomorrow I'm not hiding." He looked at her, then the way you looked at something you'd lost and found and could barely believe was real. "You're going to make this very difficult for me to keep you safe," he said. "Good," she said. "You should have to work for it." The meeting with Rendel happened on neutral ground. Saoirse had insisted. Not a building controlled by Kaylin, not a location chosen by Rendel. A public space. Documented. Witnessed. With 3 of Brielle's legal contacts present and every conversation on record. Rendel arrived as dangerous men often did. Calmly, with a smile that assumed the outcome had already been decided. He was older than she had expected. Mild-featured. The kind of face that was easy to underestimate and had probably survived as long as it had because of exactly that quality. He looked at Saoirse across the table with something that was almost approval. "Ivo's daughter," he said. "You have his eyes." "I have his partition," she said. "Which is what you actually came for. So let's not pretend this is sentimental." Something shifted in his expression. "You've been briefed." "Thoroughly." She opened the folder in front of her. "I've also been in contact with the Commercial Registry Authority, the 3 legal entities that hold the dormant claims on my father's network, and a journalist at the Varenhold Financial Record who has been very interested in the consortium's acquisition methods over the past 30 years. The smile faded by degrees. "The partition is mine by law," she continued. "Uncontestably. My father ensured that. The claims your consortium has filed over 2 decades are not only without merit. They are documented as having been filed using information obtained through facilitated access. The name Voss appears on those facilitation records." Rendel was very still. "I'm not going to war with you," she said. "I'm not interested in your networks or your history or your empire. I have a kitchen and a daughter and a business I built with my own hands, and I want to keep all 3 intact." She held his gaze. "What I am going to do is file for formal recognition of the inheritance, which your legal team cannot block because the documentation is complete and has already been submitted. And if any further attempt is made to threaten me, my daughter, or anyone connected to me, the journalist gets everything." Silence. Kaylin had not spoken once. He sat beside her. Not in front of her. Beside her. And said nothing, because this was not his moment. He understood that. She had not needed to tell him. Rendel looked between them. His jaw moved once. Then he stood. "You're your father's daughter." "I've been told that's not a safe thing to be," she said. "I've decided I disagree." He left. The legal contacts began to process the paperwork. Brielle, seated at the end of the table, caught Saoirse's eye and gave a small nod that contained 30 years of waiting in it. Kaylin reached under the table and covered her hand with his. Not dramatically. Not as a claim. Just. There. Present. Steady. She didn't move her hand. In the room where her father had been erased, his daughter had just written herself back in. And she had done it in her own words, with her own voice, on her own terms. 3 months later, the sign above the door of veil and table was repainted. Same words. better paint, the kind that didn't peel in the Varenhold winter. Jorn had done it on a Sunday while Maren sat on an upturned crate offering opinions about the brushwork that were sharper than anyone expected from a 6-year-old. Saoirse stood across the street and looked at it for a long time. The partition had been formally recognized. The consortium had gone quiet when their leverage was removed, and their methods documented. Renard Voss had resigned from 3 board positions and was, according to Brielle, spending most of his time not in Varenhold. Ondine had not been seen in the Morrow building in 6 weeks. Life had not become simple. It had become real, which was different and better. She heard him before she saw him. The car, the door, the particular cadence of footsteps she had memorized without meaning to years ago, and apparently never forgotten. Kaelin stood beside her on the pavement looking at the sign. "You changed the font," he said. "I did. It looks better." "I know." A pause, comfortable in the way their silences had become over 3 months of slow, careful work. Coffee on her terms, dinners where Maren chose the restaurant, conversations that started difficult and ended somewhere honest. "She asked me yesterday," Kaelin said, "if I was going to live with you." Saoirse smiled without meaning to. "What did you say?" "I said that was your mother's decision, and I was working very hard to deserve a yes." He looked at her sideways. "She said I should bring better snacks to the process." "She's not wrong." Another pause. "I'm not the man I was at 27, he said quietly. "I know that doesn't undo it. But I'm asking, not for forgiveness as a finish line, just for the chance to keep showing you who I'm becoming." She looked at him for a moment, at the earnestness that sat so strangely and so sincerely on a face that had spent years learning to show nothing. "You came back on your knees," she said. "I think that counts for something." "I'd do it again." She looked back at the sign. "Come inside," she said. "I'm testing a new recipe. You can be useful." He followed her in, and the door of Vale and Table closed behind them both, not on an ending, but on the first page of something that had been a long time coming and was finally, irrevocably, theirs. If this story moved you, subscribe, because the next one, it starts where this one ends, and it only gets deeper from here.